Let's see if that checks out. Maybe not yet. I don't have a notification. I don't really know if I'm live yet or not. I feel like I am. I feel live. I just had to bail out of that meeting. Okay, I'm live on YouTube. Why it didn't send a notification on Facebook? How could it not send a notification? I don't even know where to go. Hang on a second. There we are. All right. Okay, I'm live. Nope. Hush, Millette. YouTube. Okay. Sorry, guys. I had a meeting, and of course, the part that I was had input to give on was at the very end of. Well, it was actually going to go on, but I felt obligated to stick around, so I had to be a little bit late. It was a unwinnable. It was the lose. It was the no-win scenario. How close does this thing get? You guys like that? Nobody likes that. All right, there we go. So how's everybody doing? Ben, how was the first day of school? Yep. The Kobayashi Maru. I know it sounds like maneuver, but you're thinking Maru. Busy? Yeah, I suspect so. I feel for you, man. I was a sub. So this was an experiment we did when I was in Florence. Florence is a small community. We had a 2A school. I think when everything got when they built a 6A, like they bumped everybody up, it became 3A. But it was very small. Relatively speaking, I don't know. Anyway, maybe 70 people in a class. So I was trying to get more integrated with the community, as you do in smaller communities. Make sure everybody knew who I was. So I subbed for a year full time. Ended up being full time. They liked me, and so every single day they called me, and I just couldn't do it, man. It was it was too much work for not enough money for the amount of times that I couldn't go to the bathroom when I had to. It was the intersection of those three things. So I have a lot of respect for you doing that, Ben. It's hard work. Hey Zoe, how are you? If you all will bless me with just a minute, I'd like to go down and tell my wife hello. She came home from work in the middle of that meeting, and I need to tend to another piece of business, and then I'll be right back. So you guys can talk for a little bit with each other. Maybe ask Zoe how her day's going. Ask her how being pregnant is, something like that. But I'll be right back. I'm not going to put up the be right back thing. I'm just going to leave my chair empty, but I will be right back. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate that. I was asking Zoe if you had picked out a name yet, or if you're stuck between a couple of different names. Yeah, that was my fault. I muted it when I went downstairs and forgot to unmute it when I came back up. Appreciate that. Now I have to listen to everybody tell me there's no sound because there's a 25-second delay between the time I say something and the time that you hear it. But I actually do really appreciate you letting me know that. That way, if one person says there's no sound, then, it could be them. But when 3 of you tell me there's no sound, I recognize that it's me. If we could figure out how to do this without the 30-second delay, we do rockin'. I'll wait for Zoe's comment. See if we've got anybody over on YouTube. I don't think so. The 7 o'clock time might not be too great. We'll have to see if we have some other options. I want to make sure Ben's got a way to connect. Joanna and Charlotte. Yeah, you got that. I like that. I like that. You'll see her and you'll know whether she's a Joanna or a Charlotte. I actually like Charlotte. I know you would think I would be a Joanna person, being a Jonathan myself, but I like Joanna too. And let's be honest, it really doesn't matter what I like. Joanna Shalkovich. Charlotte Shalkovich. Charlotte Shalkovich. I don't know about that. I don't know. Anyway, let me look. Oh yeah, you didn't ask me. Okay. Hey Derek, how are you? How are you and Melissa? Do you float, Ben? Or do you have like a sort of a permanent assignment, or what's your gig? Will you eventually settle into one specific thing? Hey, Jack and Dorothy, good to see you. Might get a few people on here. More of a consultant. I gotcha. It's always good to be the consultant. Oh my gosh, I swear I wouldn't even be tired if I hadn't just had that meeting, probably. It's been a long day. It's been a long month. And it's only the 8th. So stuff coming up. Nothing big, I guess, really, for y'all. Communion on the 20th at 9 a.m. before church starts. And then when communion is over, I'll run home and we'll do the worship live stream as normal. I'm doing that because last time I was sick for 3 days because it was like 95 degrees outside when we were doing it. And I stood outside for an hour and a half or so between setting up and doing it all and tearing it down. And it really made me sick for about 3 days. And it might be cooler by September 20th, or it might be 105 degrees. Your guess is as good as mine. But I thought we'd try the 9 a.m. It would still give people time to get up to come to church on a Sunday morning. Would be good, I think, and have communion and then go home and worship together if we can. I think that'll be a good time. So just know that's happening. And then on the 21st and 22nd, you can come by and have communion if you weren't able to come on the 20th. And also those 3 days, if you have a gift for Zoe and Marco and either Joanna or Charlotte Shalkovich, you can drop those off, and we'll put them in the room where they are going to be by themselves when they open up the presents. And if you want to be part of that, check out your worship packet for this week when you get it. It has Courtney Shaver's contact information, and you just let her know how you'd like to participate, and she'll make sure that you get invited correctly, whether it's via YouTube, Facebook, or Zoom. So I think that's it for announcements. I'm a home sub teacher where I show up every day for 2 semesters. I'm a home sub teacher where you show up every day for 2 semesters. I don't get that. You have to explain it to me. Jack and Dorothy, y'all doing okay? Misty, how about you? You tired? We had you had a long day today. Oh, by the way, I'm curious about. Oh, okay. Home sub teacher, so maybe like homeroom. I don't know. I think I understand what you're saying. That's what they did when I was subbing. They put me on anything, but I really liked math. You know, I like math best anyway, probably of all the subjects that you can take in high school, but especially as a substitute because there's a right answer and a wrong answer, and the kids can't really argue with you about that. Ooh, Dorothy had a herniated disc. Is that reset, maybe? Herniated disc something. It sounds very painful and not what you want to do. Hey, Becky Powers, good to see you. I'm so sorry. Oh man, I'm just old. Yeah, science too is kind of that. There's a right answer and a wrong answer. A lot of science is math based too, which I like. Oh, repaired. Okay. Did that go well, Dorothy? Do you feel better? Is that like something where as soon as they repair it, it feels better immediately, or is it you have to recover from it before it actually feels better? There's a way to go back, Ben, like at the top. It depends on if you're on a phone or a computer. If you're on a computer, there's like a back arrow someplace that you can click on. I get stuck in stuff like that too. It was amazing. Good. That's good to hear, Dorothy. It's nice when you have an instant fix that makes you feel so much better. Let's see, Ben. I'm going to. I was going to see if I could reply to your thread. Instead, I just knocked myself out completely. C thread. I think you're going to see something that says replying to Zoe, and then there's a less than symbol in front of it. And if you click that less than symbol, it'll bring you back to the main comment thread, Ben. I hope that works. If it doesn't, you know, it depends on whether you're on a Mac or a PC or an Android or an iPhone or an iPad or something like that. But we will get started with our study this evening. Not particularly. I can't even hold on to caps. Not particularly life-changing, perhaps. I don't know that there's any particular part of this that yeah, try popping out. Maybe that'll work. A lumbar needle in the disc and put medicine in the herniated disc, which eats the bad part out. Wow, that sounds very cool. There's the link to the scripture if you want to look at it. The good news has been that we can all see your comments, even though it says that you're replying to Zoe. We still see it all. Okay. So where have we come from? Ecclesiastes has just talked to us about oppression. He talked about people not having families and still working really, really hard and not having anybody to give anything to and not having any reason to work that hard. And he kind of ends that conversation with saying, it's better to have two than it is to have one. For they'll have a good reward for their toil. So if you're doing something together with somebody else, it's better. If you fall, they can help pick you up. If they fall, you can help pick them up. You work together, you have a common goal. That, we have to really embrace the things that Ecclesiastes finds joy in, because he finds joy in so few things. That for us, I think by not being quite so extreme, we can find joy in the little things, but we really have to find joy in the things that Ecclesiastes finds joy in, since he finds so few things meaningful, joyful, not absurd. And so we have a good little lesson about that it's better to be together, when that's possible. And I know we have widowed people in the church who had that and don't have it now. And they're not going to seek it again. We have the line again, if two lie together, they can keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? That's not an intimacy reference. That's a survival reference, really. So, we all need that person, that person in our lives that we can call when we're just having a really crappy day, and maybe you just need somebody to unload on. That we all need that kind of person that lifts you up. He talks about being poor and being rich, and it's better to be young and poor and wise than to be a rich old king who's a fool. So he really values wisdom, and I think people who will listen to the advice of other people. So that's kind of where he ends that chapter. And he was talking about he says, I saw all the living who, moving about under the sun, follow that youth who replaced the king. So the youth became the king. And then maybe once he became the king, he became the fool again. I think that might be a cycle that he's intimating. We didn't get that last week when we talked about it, but as we look at the next passage of scripture, I think in retrospect, that's probably what he meant. So he said, there was no end to all those people whom he led, yet those who will come later will not rejoice in him. So it doesn't matter how popular he gets, how many people he leads, what he grows up through, what happens. Eventually he's just going to die and no one's ever going to remember him. And it's just absurd, and it's chasing after a wind. So that's where we ended last week. And so this week, sorry, I'm trying to keep up on both my platforms here. This week we're in chapter 5. And so Ecclesiastes starts by saying, and it's interesting, my commentary put this together with the last part of the last verse, but I don't think it really belongs there. I'm content with the break that we have with the biblical change of chapter. I think this is its own thought. The headline I have is reverence, humility, and contentment. And none of that was really the focus of what we talked about last time. So Koleth says, guard your steps. Maybe better translated, watch your step. If we understand that idiom, we say, hey, watch your step. Watch your step. Guard your steps when you go into the house of God. To draw near to listen is better than the sacrifice offered by fools, for they don't know how to keep from doing evil. So what he's saying there is simply that people who just go to the temple to make sacrifices all the time are making the sacrifices all the time because they're sinning all the time. That's what the sacrifice was for. The sacrifice with the priest's helps would absolve you of your sin. And Koleth is saying, just keep your mouth shut. It's your mouth that's going to cause you to sin more often than anything else. So it's better to just listen. Just go to the temple to listen. Don't always be going to the temple to sacrifice. There's some good wisdom in that. And with the following statement, never be rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be quick to utter a word before God. For God is in heaven and you upon earth, therefore let your words be few. So I think maybe this harkens a little bit. I mean, it doesn't because it came before. Maybe Jesus harkens back to this a little bit in his Sermon on the Mount when he talks about the prayers. And he says, don't get caught up in using big fancy words and praying long prayers. Your Father in heaven knows what you want before you even ask. I think that's what Coleth is saying, really. He's saying that, when you go into church, go to listen. Don't just go to talk. Go to listen. Learn from the messages. Learn from the reading of the scripture. Learn from the mistakes of other people. Don't just go to church because you have a guilty conscience, and literally because you need to make a sacrifice. So there's some other proverbs that I think about with this, and some things that I think James says in 1 James, things like the proverb that says better to, this is the English proverb that's come from it, but it's really close in the book of Proverbs. Better to keep your mouth closed and have people think you're a fool than to open it and prove it. There's a very close proverb to that. And James says essentially the same thing as well. More on the side of one of the habits of highly effective people from Stephen Covey, which is seek first to be understood and then to understand. No, strike that, reverse it. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. So you go in, how can you understand a situation? How can you understand a person? You listen to what they have to say. And only then do you seek to be understood. Only then do you speak and say, okay, and it's really good. It's good practice to make sure that you understand. And as human beings who can't read minds, one of the ways that we can make sure that we understand is ask people if that's what they're saying. Somebody, just make up an example on the spot. You come home from work and your wife says, well, you're finally home. You're just at work all the time and is frustrated. And you say, well, yeah, I've got to have a job. That's how work works. Sometimes you work late, but you're enjoying the house we're living in. So that's how it is. That's just how arguments happen. The best thing is to sit back and listen in this imaginary example, to what your wife was saying, and repeat it back. Wow, I hear you say that you are really frustrated with the amount of time that I'm spending at work. And she might say, yeah, I really am. And thank you. And then you could say, whatever the situation is, I'm frustrated too. I don't know how not to do it. I don't think it's going to last forever, but I agree it's frustrating. And then all of a sudden, what could have been an argument is completely diffused. So, this is a good example for how to be in relationship with one another, but it translates a little bit with how to be in relationship with God. When we think of prayer, we really think of speaking. We think of sitting down and saying, "Dear God," and not stopping talking until we're done. That's not how you have a communication. That's not how you have a relationship with somebody else. You have to have two-way communication. So our prayers should involve some listening. And Coleth is reminding of that. Speaking of listening, I'm a little tired tonight. I'm a little down. My voice might be a little down. But I fixed an issue I didn't know that I had since I switched to this interface where the sound was only coming out of one speaker. So especially if you had a bad speaker, that may have been some of the sound issues. So I don't know if you guys can hear better tonight, but it should be it should sound a little bit better. I hope it does. Okay, let's move on. Oh, hey, let's see who joined us. Kimberly, good to see you. Jennifer Morgan. Yeah, we're back to Thursday nights for a little bit. We needed to shift to a 7 p.m. Time for the people who are back at work and can't get off at 3. So before I couldn't do it on Thursday because I'm wiped out by 7 o'clock at Thursday. It turns out sometimes I'm wiped out at 7 o'clock on Tuesday, but I'm doing okay. So we are back to Tuesday nights. Yeah, I think even on YouTube it was still only coming out of the left channel. That's how I noticed it. So that's fixed. So I think the sound should be much better. Thank you, Ruben. Appreciate that. All right, so let's continue on. Again, he says, never be rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be quick to utter a word before God. That's always good. Again, good advice, people to people relationship, good advice, person to God relationship. For your God's in heaven and you're on earth. God is above your station in life, and that probably should be taken into account. Therefore, let your words be few. For dreams come with many cares, and a fool's voice with many words. That's just a proverb that I don't know if you heard that or not, but I think Cheryl emptied half a cabinet by accident. I love my life. I wanted to see, give me just a second as I cheat. Yeah, I've got nothing specifically about that verse. Dreams come with many cares and a fool's voice with many words. Take that for what it will. I guess if you have dreams, you have a lot that you need to think about. And if you don't really have a dream, you don't have a plan, you're just a fool without an idea of where you're going, you're probably just going to talk a lot. And so now we get into some really important advice. And there are a few places in the Bible that say something to this effect. So this is a good one for us to pay attention to. This is good wisdom. Koleth says, when you make a vow to God, do not delay fulfilling it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Reminds me of 1 Peter, maybe? No. It's 2 Corinthians, where Paul says God does not suffer fools. Basically the same thing here. God has no pleasure in fools. Fulfill what you vow. It's better not to vow than you should vow and not fulfill it. That's pretty obvious. Don't make promises you can't keep, especially to God. If you make a promise to God, you have to keep it. Don't say, Lord, if you get me out of this one problem, I'll go to church every Sunday for 3 years. Honestly, I'm not quite sure that's how God works in the first place. But even if it was, if you make the promise, you need to do it. That reminds me of the story of the guy who was late for a job interview. He really needed the job. It was raining. It was bad weather. And he pulled in the parking lot, and he had like 1 minute to get inside before he was going to be late. And the parking lot was completely full. And he said, Lord, if you will just find me a parking spot, I will quit drinking. I'll quit going to the bars. I'll quit fishing on Sunday mornings, and I'll go to church. I will be perfect. I will do everything that you have ever wanted me to do. And just as he was praying this, a cloud broke and the sun shone through the sky onto a parking spot in what we called King's Row, the very first parking spot. And the guy said, oh, never mind. I found one. Parked and went inside. We can't do that. If you're going to make a promise to God, you need to keep that promise to God. It's better just not to make the promise than to make the promise and not to fulfill it. And so then he gets into kind of what he's talking about. And this is why I think if we go back to the last chapter, the very end of it, where he says, I don't know, maybe not. But he talks about the young wise youth is better than the old foolish king, and then eventually the young wise youth becomes the old foolish king, and it's all absurd and vanity. And for some reason, I was thinking that led into this concept, but it's evading me right now. But he says, "Don't let your mouth lead you into sin," and that seems to be the problem. And I mean that's. I don't have any tattoos, but if I was going to get one, that might be the one that I would get. If I need a reminder of anything, it's not to let your mouth lead you into sin. My mouth usually gets a few words out before my brain fully lets my mouth know what I should say. And so he warns against that. He's really... promoting this idea of a thoughtful, thought-provoking, intentional life. where you listen more than you talk, where when you say something, you really mean it, and where you don't let your mouth lead you into sin. And don't say before the messenger that it was a mistake. So don't, if you borrow money and the master's messenger comes to take the money, don't say, "Oh yeah, I shouldn't have done that. That was stupid of me." That's not going to work. Why should God be angry at your words and destroy the works of your hands? So again, perhaps the little bit of that Deuteronomistic theology, the idea that if you do bad things will happen to you, is slipping in here. But he's basically saying that if you make a promise and then you don't keep it, God's going to be angry at your words and he's going to destroy the works of your hands. So he's having a really hard time letting go of that theology that if you do good things happen to you, and if you do bad things happen to you. And this is a place where it seems like that slips back in. And then he says, with many dreams come vanities and a multitude of words, but fear God. So now this is really confusing. If you go back and look at chapter 3, he says, for dreams come with many cares, and a fool's voice with many words. So now I had interpreted that originally as sort of a pro and a con. If you dream, then you care and you're thoughtful, but if you don't have a dream in mind, you're a fool. Seems not to be the case, because now he's saying the exact same thing, which is with many dreams come vanities, which we again are translated. That's that word hebel. It's the plural here. The vanity of vanities, for instance. But we are translating that as we're trying to avoid the translation as meaninglessness. We started off with the idea of it being sort of this puff of wind that you can chase but never catch, and I think we're settling into the translation that several theologians have used, which is absurd. So he basically is saying with many dreams come absurdities and a multitude of words. If you have dreams, you're going to have a lot of words. Don't do that. Just fear God. And, the Old Testament idea of fearing God was to be in awe of God. So it seems here where he's saying, and this actually will make more sense as we close out the passage of scripture for the day. It does seem that he's saying that, that dreaming is not useful. That's definitely what he's saying. I think I misinterpreted 3 when we first talked about it earlier. And I did go over this today, but I just didn't remember. Let's continue. And we talked in chapter 4 about oppression, right? That's how it starts. He says, again, I saw all the oppressions that are practiced under the sun. So he talks about oppressions, but now he says, if you see in a province the oppression of the poor and a violation of justice and right, don't be amazed by the matter. It's nothing to be surprised about. That happens all the time. This is a significant time and place in human history to look back 2,300 years and see somebody who is in a position of authority say, if you see oppression, don't think much of it. He says the high official is watched by a higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. So basically everybody's getting oppressed until you get to the very top person. Only the very top person is not getting oppressed. So oppression exists everywhere. We live in a time and a place where we are actively trying to eliminate oppression. Koleth would basically tell us that that's absurd, that it's always going to exist. And again, we've said before, we're not going to walk away from this. I think we're in agreement at this point. We're not going to walk away from the book of Ecclesiastes and say, well, Koleth had it exactly right. We're critically evaluating what he has to say and why he says it. And then he says something pretty odd. Yeah, it's a different different section of clanging of cymbals of Second Corinthians, Paul. Let me see if I can get you the exact. So it's 2 Corinthians 11:19. The King James says, I don't like the King James. I get 2 Cor 11:19 NRSV. That's the verse that was coming to my mind anyway. Yeah, this doesn't say God doesn't suffer fools. It says you gladly put up with fools, being wise yourself. But that's what I was thinking about. Maybe God does not suffer fools is actually, yeah, when I look it up everywhere, it talks about, sorry, I'm trying to see where it came from. It might be Shakespeare or somebody else. I have a whole passage of, or a whole cycle of sermons about things that people think are in the Bible that aren't. But anyway, it's here in Ecclesiastes, so it doesn't matter. But I wasn't talking about the love hymn. I was referring to a different passage. Continuing on, verse 9 is really hard to translate. It's translated differently in almost every translation of the Bible. The NRSV says, all things considered, this is an advantage for a land, a king for a plowed field. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but the idea basically is no matter who plows the land, the king is the person who's going to benefit from it the most. And mostly because the king didn't have to do any of the work of it, and he's still going to get some trickle up economy. And then he says something that I think we can agree with. The lover of money will not be satisfied with money, no, the lover of wealth with gain. This also is absurd. When goods increase, those who eat them increase. So if you've got more food in the house, they just eat it and they get bigger too. And what gain has their owner but to see them with his eyes? If you collect a whole bunch of stuff, the only good it does is that you get to look at a whole bunch of stuff. There's no point in it otherwise. And he says, sweet is the sleep of the laborers, whether they eat little or much. But the surfeit, which means excessive consumption, basically, the excessive consumption of the rich will not let them sleep. So, when you get, if you've ever been so full that you couldn't sleep, that's what he's talking about. He's saying that the people who are just doing their work and aren't storing up treasures, they sleep much better than the people who are spending their whole life worried about protecting their acquisitions. He says, there's a grievous ill that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owners to their hurt. And those riches were lost in a bad venture. Though they are parents of children, they have nothing in their hands. So he's saying that it's horrible that he's seen people who saved up money and then went into a bad venture and they lost all of it. And they had families and they had no way to provide for them. He said, as they came from their mother's womb, so they'll go again, naked as they came. They shall take nothing for their toil, which they may carry away with their hands. And that's true whether you lose it or keep it through your life. When you die, you go out the way you came, empty-handed, right? This is also a grievous ill, he says. Just as they came, so shall they go. And what gain do they have from toiling for the wind? Besides all their days, they eat in darkness and much vexation and sickness and resentment. So he basically says that, the people who have everything, all they do is worry about losing it. They eat too much. They have to buy a bigger house to keep their more stuff. And eventually they're probably just going to lose it all anyway. And they're going to have a family, that they're not going to be able to support anymore. And at the end of their days, they're going to eat in darkness, and they're just going to constantly be confused and sick, and they're going to be resentful. Reminds me of most of the stories I've heard about people who have won the lottery. There are not very many people who have won the lottery and are happy. Even fewer who have won the lottery and still have money from it. So that's kind of what that passage is about. And finally, he says, finally, he's given us this whole litany about what's bad. And he's finally going to say, this is what I have seen to be good. And this is going to sound familiar. It is fitting to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil which one toils under the sun, the few days of life God gives us. For this is our lot. So once again, Koleth says, there's nothing more really than to eat, drink, and be happy in your work. That is a consistent message that we have heard at least 3 times now in that specific language. For this is our lot. Likewise, to all whom God gives wealth and possessions and whom he enables to enjoy them and accept their lot and find enjoyment in their toil, this is the gift of God. So here he's saying that there are some people, in his estimation, that God has given the gift of wealth. And as long as they're happy with what they have, they still have to do work, but they're in a better station than maybe the people who have less. But if they just don't long for more, if they're not obsessed by the constant desire to increase what they have, they can also eat, drink, and be happy in their work. And that's their lot. It's a gift from God. Whatever work God gives us is a gift. And I think we've heard that enough in the book of Ecclesiastes that it behooves us to figure out what it is that is the work that God has given to us. Again, I keep bringing this saying up. The person who loves their job never works a day in their life. That's kind of the cliched message that you can distill down from the teachings of Koleth so far. He says, these people will scarcely brood over the days of their lives because God keeps them occupied with the joy of their hearts. So they're not brooding. They're not worrying about what they've lost. They're not worrying about what they haven't gained. They're living their life. They're eating, they're drinking normal amounts, and they're enjoying the work that God has set before them, whether it is to till the field or to be the landowner who has people tilling the field for them, or to be the wise king, if there is one that remains wise. Surely taking on well, I don't know, Solomon ended up not being so wise, but that's his point. It's overreach at any level. And again, we talked about this last time. It's being content. Contentment is a key to happiness, according to Koleth. There's nothing better than to eat, drink, and be content, to be happy with the work that God has given to you. So that is our message for today. All right. Well, thank y'all. Thank y'all for joining. We actually didn't see any prayer requests this evening. I forgot to ask for them up front. But we will just know that God knows the desires of our heart, and we will close with a prayer. Lord, thank you for giving us this holy wisdom. It's sometimes we feel like we're plotting, but we are working through it. And within it, we are finding consistent strands of your truth, and we're figuring out how they apply to our lives. And what else can we do, Lord? We're grateful for this holy word that exists in our holy Bible, and we're thankful for this community to discuss and learn and grow, and ultimately to apply, so that we ourselves can enjoy our lives in the way that you would have us to enjoy them, to be content with what we have. Not that we shouldn't seek out something better, but that we shouldn't be obsessed with more. So we give you thanks for that. We lift up any concerns, any joys, anything that's on our hearts tonight, Lord, that did not go spoken, we give to you. As Jesus said, our prayers don't need to be wordy because you know our needs before we speak them. And for that, we give you thanks. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining. I hope you enjoyed it. We are actually, I think we're getting somewhere. So we're finding some consistencies within what Koleth says. And we'll continue on, and we'll see where it leads. So, as always, God bless, Godspeed, and very much thank you for watching.